I'm the CEO of the Newport Beach Public Library Foundation in Orange County, California. Thank you for inviting us into your homes this evening for the first ever virtual Witty lecture. When we initially planned this season, Zoom wasn't part of our daily lives. In some ways, I mourn our in-person gatherings at the library, but then we wouldn't be sharing this evening with people from Canada, New York, Arkansas, the Carolinas, Texas, and dozens of other places near and far. Usually when I do these introductions, there's much housekeeping, but all you really need to know is if you want to ask a question, use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. For many of you, this is your first Witty lecture, and the 2021 program season is made possible by all the sponsors you saw in our slideshow, plus all our dedicated foundation members, ticket holders, and the Witty family. Thank you all for going above and beyond to make our programs possible and to help us fulfill the Foundation's mission of providing funds to purchase valuable analog and digital resources for the library. You make the library card a powerful tool for everyone who wields it. We salute you and we appreciate you. To find out more about the Foundation and our upcoming programs, please visit our new website at nbplf.foundation. Now I'm going to hand you over to the chair of our Witty Committee, Janet Hadley, and she will introduce our wonderful speakers who have promised us an evening of food, laughter, and love. Janet, take it away.
Thank you, Meg. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
I'm imagining that you're all in your comfortable clothes with a favorite beverage and your family, maybe some close friends who are in your bubble. Tonight, for the very first time, as Meg said, the Witty Lecture Series has expanded its wings to reach our guests far outside our usual Newport Beach boundaries. So welcome to everyone from across the United States, and now I hear we've even gone international. As many of you know, the series was founded in 1996 in honor of Martin Witte, a man who loved the idea of libraries and loved his library card. The purpose of our series is to offer you, our community, the best speakers that we can find on the most timely topics. And we couldn't do this without our generous sponsors. And remarkably, even in the face of a pandemic, our sponsors stepped forward to support us, not knowing how we would carry this out this year. So thank you for your trust in us. In line for recognition also are the members of the Witty Lecture Series Committee and Meg Linton, Kunga, and Sean, our foundation team. They're the people that really make it all happen. So tonight's guest is Samin Nosrat. She's a master chef. She will be interviewed by Gillian Ferguson, a friend. As many of you know, she rose to fame with her Netflix series, Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat. And her book has the same name. Gillian is a longtime producer of KCRW's Good Food, where she is the host of the Market Report. And she's also an author and the producer of two different food documentaries that were on Netflix. In spite of our upsetting, turbulent, contagious, and disruptive times, there is certainly one consistent act in our day-to-day lives. We have been preparing our meals. And throughout the pandemic, we have continued to eat. We've had the pleasure, the challenge, and the persistence of organizing and preparing meals. For some of us, those meals were eaten alone, and for other people, you've prepared meals for many, many unexpected family members that have been staying with you day after day after day for almost a year now. For some people, a chore became a joy, and for others, a joy became a chore. Well, tonight we have with us our special guest who will make cooking a joy for us again. She will buoy us with her warm-hearted charm and her perpetual smile. Samin was named one of the most influential people by Time magazine in 2019, and her influence continues. Samin and Gillian are a great team, so please join me in welcoming both of these talented and engaging women to the Witty series. I have one note, since hopefully families are watching together. You'll all have a chance to ask questions, and Meg identified the chat feature. But if you are younger than 12 years old, and we all know your names, many of you. Please identify yourself as a kid question and then type out your question. Samin would like to take good care of you tonight. So again, with the support and labor of many, I bring to you tonight Samin Nosrat and Jillian Ferguson. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Janet, and thank you, Meg, as well. Thank you to the Newport Beach Public Library Foundation for putting this on. I am thrilled to be here. Hi, Samin.
Hi, Jillian. Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for coming.
I know we're going to giggle a lot tonight.
I know. I'm so excited to see you.
Me too.
And all of you invisible people out there from all over.
Yeah. Right before we came on live, we were doing our sound check, and Samin, I learned that you recently acquired an Instant Pot for the first time. I'm dying to know what the verdict is.
I know. Well, I guess the jury is still out. I'm a little bit nervous to reveal that I'm not immediately in love, let's say. I wanted to be, I really wanted to be, but I think I just love, like, I'm that person who opens the oven like 90 times, you know? So it's kind of the idea of like putting something somewhere and then just not being able to check it is so hard for me.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like, I'm like, what's happening in there? Like, I need to know what's happening. So it's like I'm still not used to it. And, you know, I think a lot of my professional cook friends are like, you have to get it. Like, it just makes bean cooking.
Yes.
It's so good for beans. But I just have not figured out the bean thing yet. And like, and everyone's like, well, it takes trial and error. But by the time I like up the pressure, release the pressure, I'm like, I could have just done the beans on the stove. So I don't know. My jury's still out. I did try the chicken, the Indian butter chicken, which is the main reason I wanted to get it.
Tell us how you got it in the first place.
Yeah, the viral, 2 years ago, I read this article that Priya Krishna wrote in the New Yorker, the butter chicken lady. And it was in that book, Indian Instant Pot. She wrote this recipe for like this 11-minute Indian butter chicken. And that was a total success. So that was really awesome. Yeah.
You know, as I was preparing for this conversation, I went back in my calendar and I realized that the last time that we saw each other was in March 7th of 2020.
And that was the last time I got on. That was the last time I got on a plane. That was the last time I ate in a restaurant. That was the last. It was
someone who wasn't in my immediate family.
Yeah.
And, you know, you got on that plane, went back to Oakland, and then everything changed.
Yeah.
And I feel like you were so quick to pivot. You, like, within a week had a trailer up for a podcast all about home cooking. I was like, how does she do this so fast? The podcast, we should say, if people don't know about it, it's called Home Cooking. Samin co-hosts it with Rishikesh Hirway of Song Exploder. Take us back to that moment and the origins of that podcast. Did it come out of the shutdown or was it planned in advance?
Oh no, it definitely came out of the shutdown. So I've been friends with Rishi for a few years, and he is a prolific podcaster. He is just so talented, such a great producer. And we had an idea, I think right after the Netflix series, my Netflix series, Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat came out. It was right around the holidays. And we had this experience where I was in LA actually, and he was setting up, he had the ingredients for what we've now documented as his family's mango pie on his counter, but I had never seen this collection of ingredients like cream cheese and mango puree and Cool Whip and a graham cracker crust. And I was like, what is happening here? And so he told me the story that this is this recipe that his mom made every year. And it's like his family's Thanksgiving tradition. And so he was going to make it because now he wasn't going to go home. And, you know, so he was sort of making it, and he was making a practice version a few days before Thanksgiving. And so I ended up coming back home, and the next day he called me and he was like, something went wrong. There are all these little white spots, like something didn't dissolve properly. And I said, well, taste it. Like, what's the white spots? Is it cream cheese or is it Cool Whip? Because those were the only two white ingredients. and he said, it's cream cheese. And I said, oh, you probably didn't like let the cream cheese come to room temperature. And I think like you need to just make sure everything's the same temperature when you mix it. You have to do it again and make sure everything's the same temperature. And he kind of hemmed and hawed and didn't believe me. And he was too embarrassed to call his mom. So he called his sister and she said the same thing. So he did it again and listened to me, and it was right. And he was like, this is amazing. You're a mystery, you're a detective. We have to do a podcast called Chef Detective where you solve people's cooking mysteries. So for like 2 years, basically, he's been like, let's do a podcast called Chef Detective. So he's had this on his mind, but like he's been busy making a Netflix show. I've been busy, and we never really did it. And then the minute, you know, the shutdown happened, he saw me sort of starting to give people advice via Instagram of cooking at home. And he was like, the time is now, let's just do this. And so it was this kind of unique thing where we had been thinking about it, and he had the skills of, you know, he's so talented, and he just coached me how to like get my audio set up. I have it right here, the whole thing. And and so, you know, and like I had a built-in podcast, you know, crew basically in one person, and we just so quickly could do it. And we did it. So so we got going, and we were just going to make 4 episodes at first, but people really responded to it, so we just kept going.
Oh my, it's so much fun. For anyone who hasn't listened, I really encourage you to do it. It just feels like a big hug from Samin. Like I told her last week that every time I would listen to an episode, it was like my jaw would hurt at the end because I'd been smiling so much. I started listening to it a little bit late in the game, and I realized it was probably like April. We'd been in quarantine for a while, and I found myself laughing out loud, and I was like, I forgot what it felt like to laugh, you know, and so alone in this moment. But did you have any idea like what a balm it would be?
Oh no, I mean, I really feel like I couldn't have made it through last year without it. Like it was both so important because I live by myself. So it was both really important for me to have this way to connect with my friend, you know, and I feel like Rishi and I grew really close last year making this thing and talking so much together and just working on it together. And then also, you know, connecting with all of the people who sent their questions and just like everybody. I had no idea it just brought so much joy to people, and it made people feel so good, and that made us feel really good. Yeah. And I mean, it was just pure silliness. Like it was so dumb. It was just so silly and so dumb, and like and like in a lot of ways in the beginning I was really embarrassed because I wanted to make something really like hoity-toity and well researched and produced, but like it was not the thing the moment called for. It was called for like a hug and joy and laughter, and that's what it was. And I think a lot of people were like, I don't care about cooking, but it's not really about cooking. It's just about being silly and being together. Yeah.
Yeah. I work in radio, and I've learned over the years that radio is such an intimate medium, you know, with television. Like we watch you on Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat, and you're on the street and you're eating gelato, and like we see you there. But with radio, like people listen.
You're here.
Years, and it's so private, and you're in their private spaces with them in the kitchen, in the car. And so I have found that people form really strong attachments to the host, and they really get to know you. And I'm sure you heard from people from all over the world. Were there any like themes that emerged about what people wanted from food and cooking and you in that moment?
I had to protect myself, so I don't check the email. I don't really know. I mean, I don't really know. I did dip in recently, and I was kind of surprised. Like there's like both like incredible, like just like such warm feedback. You know, there was one amazing message that we played on the podcast of this lady who was just like bereft when we took a break. She's like, where did you go?
Yeah. I mean, it's like for some people that was the only human interaction we had was
right? Yeah. And then so I mean, and I felt it too. Like I'm actually really sad that I don't have this thing to make with my friend. And but then I also, you know, in some ways I'm shocked too, like the entitlement that people feel of the kind of like to tell us about the kind of like negative feedback that they feel like they can tell us. Like people are like, you pronounced pecan wrong. Like they were really rude. And I said, and that's part of why I don't check the email is like, I don't have a very high tolerance for that kind of stuff. It can make me really upset for days. And so I said something to Rishi. I was like, people send really rude stuff to that. And he's like, oh yeah, you know, for all of the podcast emails that I've ever seen, like all the email accounts, like this is actually the least rude stuff I've ever seen. Like this is, and I was like, oh, that's good to know. Like, so, but it is, I think, because people feel so intimate, they just are like, oh, I can say whatever I want to you because I have a very close relationship to you. So not exactly the answer to the question you wanted, but no, I mean, I think people really feel like they, you know, they just want, they want to be part of it with us. And so, yeah, but I think we really like, shrimp Jenga of all the things, like, yeah, like people just like want to be in on an inside joke, you know, like, yeah. Also, I have my own like character of my life here. This is my own, who's just like losing her mind here, eating a banana. Come here.
We're gonna get to see right now.
Yeah, I tried to like give her something to be busy about, but she's now like completely losing her mind. This is Baba being very disruptive. So yeah. So
yeah, you know, you were talking about like what people sort of want from you and expect from you in terms of podcasting, and I've thought about that so much this year, just in terms, you know, as food writers, food broadcasters, usually you're talking about recipes and pleasure and what brings people joy. And this year has been so crazy. I think that you're juggling a lot of expectations about what people want from you, right? Like they're the people who want recipes, they're the people who want the heavy hitting journalism. How did you sort of balance all that last year?
I mean, I don't know. It's so hard. It's been so hard, and my heart has been so heavy, and I try to take really seriously what I feel people want from me, and I try to prioritize that, maybe sometimes too much, maybe most of the time too much. I try to think about what other people want, but I feel like this year has been just if it's proven anything, it's impossible to please everybody. And you know, you know, a year ago I went into the year really depressed, knowing that I had a book to write. Like I really was like, okay, I'm going to focus on this book, and that involves like really buckling down and doing a lot of recipe testing. And like if I was going to grow my Instagram and internet platform, then that meant like posting a lot of pictures of recipe testing and, you know, glamorous foods. But then all of a sudden people don't have access to even like milk and eggs and bread and flour. And, you know, so even if I actually didn't have so much shortage because I could get through restaurants and professional cooks, but then what am I going to do? Post pictures of the things I'm cooking when like, how insensitive is that? So there's just like, I know where, you know, and I'm wrapped up in, I'm incredibly, you know, aware of what I have and what other people don't have. And also I'm incredibly new to being a public person, you know, and having a platform, and the weight of that responsibility is not lost on me at all. Like, and I take it very seriously. And so it's just a lot to all of a sudden, it's a lot to metabolize, and then to metabolize it in a pandemic and figure out, how do I use this? How do I take care of the people coming to look for something from me? And also, how do I take care of myself? It was just so much all at once. And then to add into that, you know, a couple months later, all of this civil unrest, and that really rocked my industry in a way that I honestly felt really glad to see happening, but that like was just, yeah, like there was, it's just, it was so much. So for a lot of days, it was just like everything I could do to wake up and so and get going. So a big part of what I have as a platform is my monthly column at the New York Times, and I feel so lucky to have that. And when I went back and restarted writing that this last year, I really made a commitment to use this monthly column for so much more than just like a way to run a recipe. And I was like, okay, a lot of people read the New York Times Magazine. A lot, every month, every time I write that, they post it on the front page of the NewYorkTimes.com, at least for a day, sometimes more than a whole day. A lot of eyeballs see that. It goes out on, at least one of those newsletters. A lot of people are seeing this. So what can I do? What kinds of stories can I tell? How do I talk about more than just food? How can I talk about issues? Who can I elevate? So I really started looking for stories of people and issues to elevate that that felt really important to talk about. So I started talking about, things like just things that I didn't see. I found, I started going into the 17,000, 18,000 recipe rich archive of New York Times cooking and realized there was not like a single, or there was only one recipe for the national dish of Puerto Rico, which is, rice, rice with pigeon peas. And it was not written by a Puerto Rican person. So I found a Puerto Rican person to represent. I found same thing with Eritrea, same thing. So I was like, okay, these are things I can do. I can populate this very rich, whereas there were 43 recipes for risotto, I'm like, these are ways where I can make a difference. I can start helping create balance here. And that's a way I can use my voice. And so it was maybe things that people didn't even know that they needed or wanted, but small ways that I felt like I could make a difference. And for example, even just my last column that came out, I was really excited about. It was a story about having to cook for yourself in prison. And I got to interview Earlonne Woods, who's the co-host and co-producer of the Ear Hustle podcast. And he told me about a dish that he loved cooking for himself in prison. And I adapted it into a totally delicious chicken and rice recipe that now people can make at home. So it's a way where it's both Instagrammable, and also it allowed me to tell a story and, bring dignity to people in prison cooking for themselves. And also in a moment, which the way that magazine schedule is, I was writing that 8 weeks ago, but it happened to come out during a time when guess what? Right now there is a story really timely about somebody in prison and what he's eating being really important, on, top headline in the news. And so this kind of juxtaposes with that really beautifully. So I don't know, I just ultimately I couldn't give everyone what they needed, so I had to look inside.
Yeah. I feel with the New York Times, I see it because I know you and I'm looking for that angle, but it's subtle in a way because you're such a master storyteller. So we're just going to kind of get lost in this story. But there was a moment after, George Floyd was killed and the protest that ensued where you became very public on social media about your activism. And I think for a lot of people who are introduced to you through your cookbook, through Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat, they see you as this super fun and bubbly cook who's going to guide them on their food journey, which you 100% are. But there's this other side of you, which is, deeply involved in activism, in social justice, in racial justice. And you took that moment to say okay, I've taught you how to make focaccia. Now I'm going to teach you what it means to be anti-racist.
Yeah.
And I just wondered, did that feel like a big turning point for you and how you were communicating who you were?
Interesting. I mean, a little bit, yes. I mean, I think there was definitely there was a little bit, yes. There was a little bit of okay, here I go, I'm jumping off of the diving board. Because I think in my life, surprise, I'm Iranian. I was born to Iranian parents. Surprise, if you didn't know that, I'm not white. But I was born in California. I'm American, but and I grew up in San Diego, Southern California, in a sea of whiteness. And so I have spent my life sort of and I don't know that I have language for this, but I have spent my life sort of I definitely didn't have language for this until probably 6 years ago, making the white people around me feel really comfortable, or just trying to blend in, And I don't think I even understood that I was just trying to blend in. I was like, and I didn't even realize like that I was trying to do that, because like, and also that there was no hope that I would ever blend in because of my name and the way I would look like, but and I wasn't totally erasing who I was, you know, or my culture. I love my culture and I love our food and I love where I come from, but it was just this sort of like, I'm not going to make a big stink. Like, I'm just going to go the path of least resistance. And so I think over the last like 6 or 7 years, as I have learned more about racism and anti-racism and, you know, and intersectionality and feminism and sort of the ways that I have participated in racism and choose to not participate in it and all of those things, it definitely was sort of, there wasn't like an active moment and a decision where I was like, okay, I'm going to now like take an active stance. And there have been so many choices that I've made in all of my work to, you know, active choices in the like hiring decisions and all sorts of things that are all there. But I don't think I had ever fully explicitly like, you know, put it on a banner for all to see. And so here it was, yes, putting it on a banner for all to see. And so that was a little bit, I guess, scary, but also I was like, whatever, if I don't know what I had to be afraid of. Like, I just needed to say it. It wasn't like anybody who it wasn't gonna, I don't know, like, it's not a secret that like if somebody was gonna hate me for my skin color before, wasn't gonna hate me for my skin color after I said it. So I yeah. So but yeah. And did I get some credit? Yeah, definitely. I think I have to protect. I have learned, don't read the comments, don't read the, like, I just can't read that stuff because that hate is so intense. There's so much like racist vitriol that comes my way, and it really keeps me, it's really upsetting and it keeps me up, and I just can't, it's really disturbing and awful and traumatic, and I can't really function for many days, and so I have to just protect myself from it. But there are a lot of people who have it a lot worse than I do, so I just have to keep going. And that's what I mean by like the responsibility of having a platform and being a public person, is like I have it, like I'm the one who, you know, got the opportunity, I got the book deal, I got the TV show when so many other people didn't. And so it's my job to keep going and make sure that the door keeps being opened for the people, for others. So I'm not the only one, like, and yeah, so.
You know, this year has been such a roller coaster, to say the least. What do you mentioned earlier, you know, coming out feeling depressed at the beginning of this year. You've been very open and honest about when you're feeling down. Where do you turn for joy in those moments? What grounds you right now?
Definitely going in the garden, working in the garden is like a huge source of sort of literal grounding, I would say, like pulling weeds. I mean, right now it's like we're starting all our seeds and we're starting all our plants, and yeah, just I live sort of in a little community of several homes, and we have a shared garden, so it's really nice because I think it would be really hard to do the whole garden by myself. But we have a big vegetable garden and nice flower garden, and so yeah, today Block Shop, I know Lily's here in the audience, they sent out their thing with the big dahlia tubers email, and I've like spent half an hour just like filling my cart with dahlia tubers. I was like, dahlia. So that brings me a lot of joy. Just plants. I love plants so much. Yeah, anything, the natural world, you know, I really believe like there is nothing more perfect than the natural world. Like, oh, you know, what we had here in the Bay Area for 3 weeks, which was so incredible and so special, was we had the starling murmuration, which is when, so the starlings are apparently like kind of an annoying bird. They're not very nice to other birds, I think, or to each other, but they do this, they're like a thing that they do when they're migrating is, or maybe just even when they're not migrating, I'm not sure, I don't know very much about their behaviors, but like they were migrating somewhere to warmer climes, and on their way, they stopped here for a few weeks, and at like twilight, at sundown, they do this incredible thing where like they're all coming and gathering in this one central place, and as they gather they just do this incredible flight pattern that is just like tens of thousands of them coming. You can watch videos of it online, and it's like natural fireworks. And so people would gather in this like strip mall parking lot, like shopping mall parking lot, and it was just the most I mean, it's the most incredible thing. It was really like it revitalized my whole spirit. The whole time I was like, what metaphor can I write in my cookbook about this starling murmuration? Like, it was just filling my soul with so much beauty. And I was like, you just see these things and you're like, nature is perfect. There's nothing more beautiful, you know, that, or like going to the ocean, going to the beach makes me feel so good. So that kind of stuff, like being outside those are the things that make me feel so good. And like, I just started, I was on the waiting list when the pandemic hit. I joined immediately, like everybody else in America. I joined the CSA waiting list.
Oh, yeah.
And so finally in December, 9 months later, I got off. And so I just joined, and I just got my first box today, and it's like picking up the most perfect like turnip. I just like, you know, perfect produce makes me so happy. And yeah, I don't know, like really simple things. This dog who drives me nuts makes me so happy. Yeah.
I also noticed that it seems like you've really reconnected with poetry this year.
Yes, and poetry. Yeah.
Before you found food and like walked into Chez Panisse, you aspired to be a poet.
Yeah.
Was there any particular like poem or a poet that inspired you this year?
I think Ross Gay has been like, actually also Lily, big theme. Our friend Lily Stockman sent me the Book of Delights, Ross Gay's Book of Delights, which was really like a great thing to read last year. And is just, which actually isn't so much poetry, it's like little essays, but he is just very, you know, the thing I love about poets is I feel like they're master observers, they're like master noticers. And so, and just, you know, any great writer, but like poets have to just put it in such beautiful, tight sort of places. And so I've started even just printing out, there's this wonderful Instagram account, Poetry is Not a Luxury, that I love, and I'm always like reposting. And anytime, I don't know, I think the person's anonymous. My hunch is that it's a Black woman, I don't know, but anytime, so I'm just gonna call her a she, but like anytime I like really love something of hers, I'll save it and then I'll come find it on the internet and print it. So I have like all these, I've like been printing and just taping them around my house, like just poems that I love. And I don't know, it just makes me feel happy. Yeah, beautiful language.
What about your life in the kitchen right now? Like, is cooking something that you turn to for joy, or because this is your work, does it sort of pull you in two directions?
Yeah, I will say, like, honestly, that from March until Thanksgiving, it was a real drag. Like, it was really depressing and lonely and sad. And I did not enjoy, there was no enjoyment for me, and and I think in large part because it felt really lonely. And I think cooking for me a very long time ago, really early in my cooking career, stopped really being about food and started being about people. And I am really lonely. You know, I have one friend really, and her husband are in my pod. And because I live here in this little community, like we gather outside. So I'm not totally alone. Like we'll have like a potluck outside sort of and sit across the table and eat. So I'm not totally alone, but like just that feeling of sort of like sharing meals in a house and like waking up and then you're eating the leftover, like I don't have any of that. There's just not that sort of like, what are we going to do? What are we going to make there? I don't have any of that. And so I don't have any of that sort of culinary, sort of like that inspiration with your friends that keeps you going as a cook. And I don't have anything. I'm just like this one island person just like eating peanut butter toast. And so like,
I don't know. Post about the peanut butter toast. I felt so seen.
Yeah.
I think you said that if you were a tree and you cut yourself open, your 2020 ring would be peanut
Just
butter.
be peanut butter toast. I just ate this. Yeah. And so I really was like, what? And like because anytime Rishi and I recorded the podcast, he'd be like, at the beginning of the episode, he'd always be like, what'd you cook this week? And I always dreaded him asking me because I wanted to be like, peanut butter toast. That's all I made this week. like, but finally for Thanksgiving, like I quarantined and I went and I had two friends who lost moms last year, and so it was really sad. And so one of my friends, I went and spent Thanksgiving with her on her family ranch in Ojai, and it was amazing because in that way where like a farm is sort of, you know, apart from, we kind of like had the fridge stocked, and you know, we just stayed on the farm for a whole week, and there are 3 generations of the family that live on the farm. And so it really gave me like a dose of that thing that I missed so much, where I got to cook for and with this family for like 7 days, and we used every drop of everything, and like we just cooked and cooked and cooked, and everybody, and like I could make whatever I wanted would get eaten. And I was like, oh, I didn't forget. I was like, I'm not a bad cook. I didn't forget how to do this. I do know what I'm doing. Like, and you know, and it was that thing where like you couldn't just run out and get whatever you need, and so you improvise and you use the thing, and which is all of that stuff is the kind of stuff that I'm writing about in this next book. And so it gave me so much momentum and energy, and I really came back with this sense of like, oh, I can do this, and maybe what I need to do is like quarantine and go be around people, or just kind of like jump started me. And I don't know, I'm feeling a little bit better, and yeah, I just kind of feel like I can do that for myself and figure out ways to do it. And maybe now, even though I don't have any like illusions that we're anywhere near the end of things, like in the vaccine, you know, whatever, I feel a little more hope. I feel, I don't know, I feel like I can figure it out. So I yeah, I don't know, I sort of have a little momentum now. So I'm cooking a little bit more every day, and like, yeah, this idea that I can sort of wrap the food up and give it away and just keep going, just keep going, just keep going.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I use the word inspiration, but I'm sort of equating that with creativity, right? Like for me, I'm someone who takes a lot of energy and creativity from the people around me.
Yeah.
So did that experience, when you talk about momentum, is that creative momentum?
Yeah, it was definitely creative momentum. And I think a big part of it is boundary. You know, I think I have spent several years, and certainly even though last year I didn't go anywhere, I was like doing a Zoom event, doing Instagram Live, 1 million emails, phone calls, all this stuff. I was constantly just like outputting.
Right.
And I reached a point where I was like, oh, if I don't create a boundary and start filling myself with stuff, I'm never going to be able to create anything ever again. Right. And I need to be able to take some stuff in so that I can make this book, so I can make anything, create stuff, because I'm fundamentally a creative person. I even bought, like, even though I've owned over the course of my life 3 copies of it, I bought another copy of, what's the Julia Cameron book, the Artist's Way, like yeah, I was like, which you can tell I'm really deep in reading it, but like but
about this today.
Yeah, first step is buying it.
Yeah.
But like you know, I was like, I'm sort of in this like phase of like, what do I do to like just create a little creative bubble, because I am just like, I have to make a space for myself to become that creative person again. I have to create the creative boundaries. I have to protect. I have to do the things to like make the space. And yeah, and cooking is part of that. It's not all of it. It's just part of it. Writing is part of it. Taking walks is part of it. You know, making sure I'm around people I can have, you know, like take a walk with somebody who I can have like a really thoughtful conversation with. The other day I was having a really, really helpful conversation with Anna Sale, who has the Death, Sex, and Money podcast. And I was asking her all these questions about how you ask questions. Like, how do you ask questions in the best way to get the kind of answers you need? You know, like stuff like that, where I'm like, I need help being a better question asker. And so stuff like that. Yeah. Yeah.
That's such a good question. Did she have any good tips?
Oh, she had so many good answers. Yeah.
I need to call her and ask this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's so interesting about what you do is that, and at the level at which you do them, is that you have the physical, the cooking, right? That kind of output, but you balance that with the cerebral, which is the writing, the storytelling, the communicating, and they're such different parts of your output, right? Like, did they feel like that's a yin yang sort of balance that
Yes.
you need?
Yes, I definitely need both. I think I would lose my mind if I were only one, for sure. Like and very like early on in my career, I remember always feeling like something was wrong with me, because especially when I was at Chez Panisse, like around all of these very, very, very high level cooks, you know, and who are just fully dedicated as career cooks, you know, and I was like, what's wrong with me? Like, I also need to go do this other thing. Like, I need to also go write, or, you know, and, but I just am not, I'm not that. Like, I've had to always nurture, and I'm so glad that I've always continued to nurture both, you know, because I think I would lose my mind if I had to only sit at a computer, you know, or only write, or only be a physical person, because I can't, they really feed each other. And also I mean, I've never been diagnosed, but I definitely think I have like ADD or ADHD or something. And so I can't really focus totally on one thing for that long. Like it's nice to have things to switch back and forth between. And so, yeah, and they feed each other. They definitely feed each other.
Can you talk a little bit about process? Like when you are writing and you're cooking, like what does that look like in your daily life?
I mean, I'm still figuring that out for this book. I'm kind of in a weird puzzle. I wish I could like turn this computer so you can see I have this huge piece of butcher paper with like 1 million post-it notes on it, where I'm like just moving things around, because this one's it's a big puzzle. And I'm working again with the wonderful illustrator, my friend Wendy McNaughton. And she's so much more than just an illustrator. She's also like an amazing organizational mind. So she's really fundamental part of helping me understand how pieces fit together, and how to organize things, because she's so much more than just an illustrator. Like a lot of those illustrations are charts, and charts are about organization. So we talk through a lot of that stuff together. So I'm sort of, as I come up with, you know, part of it is like, ooh, what tastes amazing? Like sometimes I'm like, this thing tastes so good, I have to put it in. And then I'm like, but what lesson is part of that? You know, what lesson can I tell through this dish? And then so I'll put it here without knowing what the lesson is. Sometimes it's like, I have to tell this lesson, what dish will illustrate this lesson. Sometimes it's like, I need to tell this, I don't know, I need to tell this spectrum of so it's like all these different my brain is like right now in just total puzzle. I'm in a puzzle mode.
It's like a game of
so some yeah, it's real kookaballs Tetris. So, and some days I like have ants in my pants and I can't possibly like be writing, so I have to go down and cook. And other days I just am like so sick of the taste of my own food. Like today I like couldn't possibly eat any more beans and greens. So I came back upstairs and I was writing. So it's like right now, luckily I'm just in a sort of puzzling mode, and that's a little bit what it's happening. But when it gets a little bit further down the line, it will be more focused sort of recipe testing time versus, and then just like chunks of writing.
And can you remind us what the name of the book is?
Oh yeah, so this book, it's called What to Cook. And the idea is, so if you think of salt, fat, acid, heat as like distilling sort of the 4 elements of how a professional cook thinks about how to cook for a home cook, you know, and teaching you sort of this basic rubric of how to cook, then this is basically distilling how professional cooks walk into any scenario, whether it's a professional kitchen, a home kitchen, camping, I don't know, Airbnb, wherever, and like look around them and understand the constraints that are like invisible to most other people, but just like apparent to any professional cook and identify them, and then we'll make a decision about like what you should cook at any given time, and sort of teach you the like the how to see. It kind of like teaches you the goggle. It like will give you the like cooking goggles so that you can make better decisions about what to cook. Because I think most home cooks, in my experience, you know, make decisions about what to cook based on like either their comfort level of like, this is the thing I always make, or my kid only will eat this, or this is what we always have at Thanksgiving, or this is what I saw in XYZ magazine and this spread looks good, so I should make this, or, you know, and those choices don't always make sense based on like your given reality in any moment. Those, you know, your given reality in any moment is more, you know, often determined by like how much time you have, or how much oven space or stove space you have.
Happening.
Yeah, or yes, like your ingredients are limited by the pandemic, or maybe your garden produced 400 cucumbers and you're like, what am I going to do with all this? Right. Or you know, like I have a friend, I always say this example, but I have a friend who had a really colicky baby who she could like never put her baby down. So for like 9 months, she was like more or less cooking with one hand. So she's like, what do I cook with one hand for 9 months, you know? And so stuff like that, like that's a totally legitimate limitation, you know? And so that's like, or I think like another thing I've been thinking a lot about is after COVID, there's going to be an entire segment of the population who lose their sense of taste. And
wow.
So, and their sense of smell. And so that's going to be a question I think a lot of people are going to be asking is like, this is a constraint that we're going to have to cook for, is like our sense of smell and our sense of taste. So like, what are the things that we, you know, decide to cook based on that? So these are the kind of the questions I'm thinking about.
Wow, so interesting. I do want to ask you a bunch of food questions before we get to the Q&A, but I guess my last question otherwise is what are you looking forward to the most when we sort of be out in the world again? What are the things you miss most, and what are you looking forward to the most?
Oh, I miss hugs. I miss hugging.
You're such a good
so much. I just miss like this. I just miss being around people. I just miss the kind of the way you be. I don't even miss like the ceremonial kind of being around people. I miss the unceremonious being around people, the kind where you're in the house with people and you're not talking. Like, like, which maybe for other people who've been trapped in homes with people this whole time is totally like the opposite. But now that I think about it, maybe for you guys, you're like, I wish I had what she has. But I miss the other. I just miss like hanging out with people and like just like being quiet together. I don't know, and like not having to plan to sit across the table from each other and like catch up for 40 minutes masked, you know, or whatever. Like I don't know, like I just you know, pressure free seeing each other, where there's yeah.
I want to ask about vegetables, and in particular veganism.
Oh yes, my failed attempt. Really went down. That was like as soon as the pandemic hit, dairy was like first thing came back to my.
You tried, right?
Yeah, I tried.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, to explain for people who don't know, I read this amazing book called We Are the Weather by Jonathan Safran Foer that makes this compelling argument for like to have sort of 2/3 of your diet be vegan for climate change reasons. And I was so like, I was like, this is amazing. This is the argument I needed. I'm 100% part-time vegan, done. And then I lasted like a week, and then then the pandemic hit, and I was like, dairy, I need you. Like my comfort food. and then like, I mean, I will say I don't really eat that much meat. I don't really like, it's not like I'm some, you know, eating meat at every meal or anything, but like I really like, I was like, dairy, I needed the dairy. I haven't been on a plane in a year. I don't really drive. I mean, I don't know, but like didn't really work.
One standout dish that you figured out though while you were a vegan for a week?
Um,
I'm gonna
I mean, a lot of the things I eat, I mean, I do eat a lot of vegan things in my life. Like, it's not that I like struggled to eat a vegan thing. So I will say there are a lot of like, I relied a lot on tahini during that time, but one of my most favorite meals that I eat often during my life, even when I'm not a part-time vegan, is I wrote a column about it. It's my friend I call it Mara tofu. It's named after my friend Mara, who grew up like super hippie in Hawaii, and her like treat that her mom would get her when they went to the hippie store was marinated tofu. That was the treat. And so, but Mara makes this at her house, and I didn't really grow up eating tofu. I don't really like, it's not a thing I love, but for whatever reason, when Mara makes this tofu, it's so delicious. So I make it all the time now. And I eat this like probably twice a week for dinner. It's medium firm tofu that I drizzle with Bragg's liquid aminos and then fry in coconut oil. And something about this combination of these three ingredients, like the medium firm tofu, it's sliced into like centimeter thick slices. And because it's like this texture, it's like it's hard, it's like firm enough to hold together, but soft enough that when it gets heated up and fried, it's really custardy in the center. And then the outside, fried in the coconut oil, gets like super lacy and crisp. It's just really, it's so delicious. And then the liquid aminos, which is just like an unfermented version of soy sauce, basically. It's like really umami-y and salty and delicious. And so it's so good. It's really yummy. And I eat that often with like, usually with like rice and I don't know, boiled broccoli or roasted broccoli or spinach. It's so tasty. And it takes like 5 minutes to make. It's very delicious. Wow. Highly recommend.
It sounds amazing.
Mara tofu, love it.
Okay. I want to do a quick little speed round before we go to the Q&A. So what was the last thing you made where you thought, wow, this is just really delicious?
Oh, I made buckwheat cornbread the other day. It was so good. It was brown butter. I used Kenji Lopez's recipe from Serious Eats, but I replaced half of the all-purpose flour with buckwheat flour, and it was so good.
Awesome.
It was delicious.
What about takeout? What restaurant meal did you have this year that blew you away?
Ooh, oh my God. I got to eat the best. I got to eat, oh my gosh, Nari. It's Pim's restaurant in Pim, who's so delicious, of the most deliciousness. I cannot pronounce her last name. She is a Thai chef in San Francisco, and it was just the most exquisite. It was one of these things where I'm sure everyone is feeling this, but I am so bored of my own cooking, and I feel like everything I cook tastes the same. I'm like, everything tastes like olive oil and chili flakes and garlic. And so to eat this Thai food that is so exquisite and so just like multi-layered and like multifaceted and has so much character, and and you're just like, what? I was trying to identify all these things. And even like, I sometimes, will use like curry paste and make things with it, but this is beyond it was making my mouth so happy. It was so good. Yeah, that was so good.
What is a pantry item that you either discovered or rediscovered during quarantine that now you can't?
Oh my God. Okay. Okay. This is like, I mean, maybe should be embarrassed, but I'm totally not. Okay. I have never used until very recently Better Than Bouillon. I love it so much. Okay. It's not a replacement. It's like in that thing where like, I love both carob and chocolate. I don't think of carob as a replacement for chocolate. I love Better Than Bouillon. I also love chicken stock. I don't think of Better Than Bouillon as a replacement for homemade chicken stock. I just think of it as this thing like, I think it's a really easy and delicious way to flavor some rice.
Mhm.
But but is it a way to make some chicken stock rice? No. Is it some way to add some umami to something? Yes. So the berry bouillon was really special to me. I
Love it.
loved it.
Thank you. Thank you for giving us permission to eat better.
Oh my God, it was so exciting to me. So exciting.
That was actually one of the first things I bought when I like started panic shopping in late February. I kind of saw the writing on the wall, and bouillon was like definitely one of the first things I
Oh,
bought.
it's deeply exciting to me.
Okay, last one before the Q&A. What is your favorite cookbook right now that you would like to give a shout out to?
Ooh, oh, it's called Coconut and Sambal. It's so delicious. Can I give two? And the other one's called Parwana. It's an Afghan cookbook.
Oh,
The
that's
Coconut and
amazing.
Sambal is Indonesian, and then Parwana is Afghan, and they're both wonderful. Like just also in that way where like bringing new, I don't know, making things taste really yummy in my mouth of delicious other cuisines that are just, yeah, there's a coconut rice in the Coconut and Sambal that's really quite simple to make, and just, yeah, is like has all these fried shallots and like yummy chili oil, and just makes things taste new to me in a really bored and sad mouth.
And the photographs in both those books are also really stunning. Awesome. Well, it's 7:15, so I do want to go to the Q&A for just a little bit. We have a bunch of great questions coming in. The first one comes from Charlotte, who is 9 years old, and she wants to know, what is your favorite recipe involving chocolate?
Ooh. Okay, let me think. I love chocolate so much. What is my favorite recipe involving chocolate? Okay. My favorite recipe involving chocolate. All right. Well, probably my favorite recipe involving chocolate, the one that comes to mind right now is it's a chocolate truffle by a really amazing pastry chef named Pierre Hermé in France. Do I have that book right here? I think it's right here.
Show and tell.
Let me see if I can find it. So it's a chocolate and caramel truffle that is, so he's like this amazing pastry chef in France, and this book, where is it? Oh, I don't think there's a picture, unfortunately, but I actually, there's no picture, so I don't even know why I'm showing it to you, but I typed it out and I typed it out and I posted it on my website, so we can link to it for you. But it's actually not that hard to make. You could totally make it with your parents, and you just caramelize some sugar and you melt some chocolate into it and add some cream basically, and then it essentially tastes like a fancy Rolo. I don't know if you've ever had a Rolo candy, but the texture of it is like, it's just chewy in your mouth, and it's so delicious. It's so good. So those I really love. They're really yummy. We used to make them at Chez Panisse at the restaurant where I worked. That's where I learned about them. But I love them so much. And I think it's really fun to make candies because it feels like it shouldn't be something that you should be able to make at home. But they're pretty fun to make. So that's also. Oh, also, what am I thinking? I also love brown butter chocolate chip cookies. So and a person who has a really great recipe for those is Joy the Baker. So and brown butter, if you don't know what that is, that's just butter that you put on the stove and you let it cook a little bit long. Like you melt it and then you let it keep going past melting until it starts to sputter a little bit, goes and it turns brown and it starts to smell a little bit kind of like hazelnuts, and it just looks a little bit brown. And then you make your chocolate chip cookie dough with that, and it tastes so good. So I also like that. If the candies seem like they're kind of a little bit too hard to make, you could make that with your parents, and that is really delicious. Joy the Baker. Gary, my friend who's somewhere in here, he can send the links for both of those, and we can post those for you.
Those are great questions. This next question I think is a great one, which is it harder to come up with new recipes when you're not visiting restaurants or traveling?
To me, it's not so much it's definitely harder, I think, to not be in the world. And like not be with other people and not be inspired by other foods. And it's not so much the restaurants that I'm like drawing inspiration from, but just like a restaurant, I might eat something and that might make me think of somebody else, and then that leads me to something else. So I find myself like forced to then like look more on Instagram and in cookbooks, and that is, it kind of worries me, because then I'm like, oh no, what if what I'm coming up with is kind of copying somebody else a little bit too much. But I have to sort of trust my gut and believe that I am not copying people. And also, truly in my heart, I don't believe that anything I do is original. I believe that pretty much everything when it comes to cooking is recycled, and that we're all borrowing from each other, and that what's truly important is to credit the people that that inspire you and that you're learning from. And that's a big part of my work is telling people stories and crediting them and learning from them. And so especially like what I try to do in the column is like lift people up, tell their stories, learn from their recipes. And as I also, that's something I would like to do in this book, is maybe if I want to learn, I don't know, some Thai grandmother's version of something, I'm going to credit her and give her due in this cookbook. So what's hard is I can't like go stand over her shoulder and learn from her. So maybe I have to learn over Zoom, and I can't like taste exactly her version of it. So that kind of stuff is trickier, but we all have to adapt. Definitely the adapting is tricky, but that's why I'm like calling Anna Sale, and I'm like, we're all trying to figure out new ways of how do you do journalism? How do you do reporting with these weird constraints? It's an interesting time.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is the next question is something that I had really hoped we would talk about. I'm so glad it was asked. It's coming from Canada, which is, what are 3 things that you think will change about the restaurant industry post-COVID?
Ooh. Oh man. I don't know. I think and hope are 2 different things.
Right.
And they're like two very different things, because what I think will happen is really dark.
Mm-hmm.
And what I like really, really dark, like I'll give you one example, and then I'll do 2 hopes. I'll do 1 think and 2 hopes. So what I think is, like, for example, I've been hearing and reading a lot about the kind of consolidation that's happening and the kind of money that's going in, and by consolidation, I mean like there are huge corporations and that have a lot of power and money that have been buying up real estate, and all the businesses that have been forced to close, so that in places like in small towns and where a lot of mom and pop businesses are closing, places like the bigger chain, probably all that will be left is bigger chains, because that's who will have the power and the infrastructure and the money to be left to reopen. And so that is my biggest fear, that is my biggest worry, and I think to some extent that is going to be what happens. It will be a really sad and great loss of individuality and of tradition and of family, mom and pop sort of flavor, honestly. What I hope will happen is that because we as people will have been deprived of all that restaurants bring to us as a society, we will value them so much more. We will value the people who work there so much more, and that we will be willing to pay for it, and we will finally stop, people will be willing to, pay cooks and pay restaurateurs and pay for the service and pay for the food what it's really worth. And because we will really, really miss it, and we'll understand like what it is that, you know, it provides for, you know, it provides a lot more than just a plate of food for us. And I think that that is something that we really have learned this year. Like, so, yeah.
I want to take one more question and sort of end on a fun note about cooking. Someone asked, what are your favorite Persian recipes? Maybe you can pick one recipe. If someone's going to cook something Persian for the first time, what should they go for?
Okay, I think if you're gonna make something for the very first time, it should probably be, I'm gonna give you something I sort of adapted, which is the Persian-ish rice. So it's in the book, and also it's also, I believe, on saltfatacidheat.com, so you don't even have to buy the book, it's just on the website. And so we've tested it so many times to make it as simple and doable as possible. So it's like a simpler version of tahdig, or crispy rice. And it's just so like Persian rice is buttery and crispy, and just like it's just so delicious. It's so good. And one of my favorite things that's a little bit not trickier, just a little bit more labor intensive, if you're going to make a second thing, is kuku sabzi, which is sort of like, if you imagine a frittata with an inverse proportion of greens to eggs, but we also chop the greens up a lot more finely and saute them before we add the eggs. So it has a quite of a different like quality to the greens, and it's really sweet and herby and fragrant and flavorful. And it's so delicious. And you feel like Popeye when you eat it, because you're just eating so many herbs. And in this pandemic, it's been like just this kind of godsend, because you can put whatever herbs, whatever greens you have on hand. You can use old lettuce, you can use whatever, and it's just like you feel so strong.
Thank you so much, Samin. It's also a great way to use up your CSA, that cuckoo.
Totally, yeah. Thank you so much, Jillian. Such a pleasure talking to you.
You too.
Thank you. That was the most wonderful way for us to begin our season. I feel like I just got to look at the world through the Samin kaleidoscope. And I want to bring back all those beautiful designs and remember so much that you had to say. So it was really, really special to have you. And Jillian, I just felt like I was in the most intimate conversation with you. Your questions were terrific. It was a very, very special night. Thank you all. Thank you so much for coming. If people have questions, you can contact us at the foundation. And I look forward to seeing you all again on February 19th, when we can continue having some joy with PJ O'Rourke, a political satirist. So Samin and Jillian, very, very, very special evening. Thank you so much. Good night, everyone, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Good night.